Okay, well, I'm going to speak today about World War I memorials in Arkansas. And I'm here in my capacity as the Department of Arkansas designee, Department of Arkansas Heritage designee to the Arkansas World War I Centennial Commemoration Committee, which is probably the singularly most or least pronounceable acronym in state government. And I'm talking about memorials, and we really have a lot to memorialize in Arkansas regarding World War I. There were almost 72,000 Arkansans who served in the war, and of them 2,183 died, and close to 2,000 were wounded or injured. And I think that these are the numbers that came from the Encyclopedia of Arkansas site. I'm pretty sure there's probably some additional ones, Arkansas people who fought in with regiments from other states and things like that. So there's probably an even greater number. And the handsome gentleman on the left there is my grandfather, a World War I doughboy, and even though he was from Kentucky, we will claim him for Arkansas for today. Okay, so Arkansans began memorializing the state's World War I troops even before the war ended. This guy on the upper right is Colonel Samuel Chew of Van Buren, and after on November 3 of 1917, the first action involving American troops took place in France, and three men, Merle D. Hay, Thomas Enright, and James B. Gresham were killed in that battle, the first American Army men to die in the war. And Colonel Chew dedicated a monument on the Crawford County Courthouse lawn to them. This is the one that's there now is a replacement one. The earlier one was destroyed. And the guy on the left is Heber McLaughlin, who was a lieutenant from Arkansas, and he was wounded in that very action. So there was an Arkansas man involved in the first combat with American troops in World War I. He died in 1931 from it was his war wounds that eventually killed him. Now, some of the state's memorials reflected a larger debate among progressives in the U.S. who preferred living memorials as opposed to statuary. A lot of the artsy people around the country were not pleased with the ubiquitous Civil War markers that were all over the state. And in Little Rock, this advice was followed with two structures that traverse the Arkansas River. The Broadway Bridge was dedicated to the state's World War I troops on March 14 of 1923. And that bridge, of course, was demolished just recently and replaced with a new bridge that also was dedicated to all of the state's veterans. The Main Street Bridge became a monument to the war when the Nicholas Headington chapter of the Daughters of 1812 installed a memorial on the structure on November 11, 1924. The bridge itself was dedicated to soldiers and sailors on May 22nd of 24. And when that bridge was replaced in 1998, the memorial part of it, which you see to the left there, was moved to the MacArthur Museum of Arkansas Military History, and you can still see it today in the yard behind there. Now, another Little Rock landmark was repurposed to serve as a World War I memorial when the General Assembly, with Act 385 of 1921, designated our own old State House Museum as the State War Memorial. That's an effort that was backed by the American Legion in particular, as well as a number of other patriotic descendant groups. And there's a pretty good chance that we wouldn't be in this building right now if that hadn't happened. We could have lost the old State House. In Fayetteville, the Marion chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution sponsored an allegorical painting by William Steen, who's a New York artist, in 1920 to honor the state's war dead. And it's an allegorical painting that goes from, I think there's a caveman in there somewhere, but up to World War I. And that mural remains in the old Washington County Courthouse in Fayetteville. So if you're up there, it's worth taking a walk upstairs and checking it out. And descendant and memorial organizations were often involved in this World War I memorialization. The Nicholas Headington chapter of the Daughters of 1812, of course, were involved with Main Street, and the Marion chapter of the DAR with the Fayetteville mural. And here we have a memorial bench on the Boone County Courthouse lawn in Harrison that was sponsored by the Fanny Scott chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Then at Prairie Grove Battlefield State Park, we have this memorial gate that was added in 1908 that was sponsored by the Prairie Grove chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and you can see it's dedicated to the soldiers of 1861 to 1865, as well as the 1917 and 1918 soldiers. Then we have the Spirit of the American Doughboy at Helena in Phillips County, which is associated with the Phillips County Memorial Association and the Seven Generals chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. And then there's also several memorial plaques that can be found around Arkansas. This one's at Fort Smith Northside High School. And this one's at Vol Walker Hall, the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. This was formerly attached to a concrete block outside the building, but at some point it was moved inside. And the first person on there is Beverly Ann Bird of Waldron, Arkansas. She was a nurse who I believe died of the flu during the war, but all of the UA Fayetteville grads who died in the war are mentioned on that one. And then this one we just stumbled across recently. This is at the old Crosset PO post office down in Ashley County, and it is dedicated to the people who attended Crosset School District number 52, who died in a number of wars, including World War I. And Ashley County also has, I think, maybe the only standalone non-sculptural monument that is dedicated solely to World War I soldiers. Now, there was a move after the war to plant memorial trees, starting in Europe because so many trees had been destroyed in the war. But then that moved over into the United States as well. And this is the only known memorial trees from the post-war period that survive in Arkansas. This is a grove of holly trees that were planted at Henderson State University. And initially there were 6 of them. There were 5 students and 1 coach from Henderson who died in the war. And one of those trees died in the ensuing century. But on November 11 of this year, they had a rededication of this grove and planted another holly tree to fill it out. And then the World War I, Arkansas World War I Centennial Commemoration Committee is working with the Arkansas Forestry Commission. Our big move for this commemoration is going to be to continue that program, and I want to give a shout out to Mike Polston, who brought this idea to our attention, and it's really been a great success. Our goal is to have one in all 75 counties in the state before we're done. The first one was planted in front of this building, the old State House Museum, on September, I believe, 23 of this year. And we formally announced the program that day, and since then it's gone off like gangbusters. We currently have trees in 53 counties. So we only have 22 more to go before the commemoration ends at the end of 2018. I got to remember 20 and not 19 because I get there. But one of the things that we do when the Forestry Commission has donated these 2-year-old willow oak trees for the planting. And we got soil from the Meuse Argonne American Cemetery in France sent over. We had 3 pounds of it, which we have broken out into 75 bags. And so every tree that's planted gets a little bit of that French soil placed with it. So that's kind of cool. Okay, these are a couple of kind of interesting oddball memorials. This one here is at the Cavalry Cemetery in Little Rock, which is right off of Asher Avenue, and it's dedicated to the Puerto Ricans who came from who were working at the picric acid plant at Pickering, Arkansas. If you've ever gone, you know the Holiday Inn out by the airport. That's where this great sprawling plant was. And if you go to the YouTube channel, you can hear Carl Drexler's excellent talk about manufacturing and picric acid during the war. So a lot of these Puerto Rican guys who came over here to work died of disease, and that memorial cenotaph was placed at Cavalry. Next to that is the Grant County Veterans Park, which is in the middle of nowhere in Grant County, and it's really worth going to because these guys made a scale model of a B-52 or B-17 bomber, you know, because it's at a location where a B-17 crashed during World War II, but they've dedicated it to soldiers of all wars, and there's a nice panel there for the World War I guys from Grant County. And then we have the Medal of Honor Memorial at the Arkansas State Capitol, which includes plaques to the 3 men with Arkansas roots who won the Medal of Honor in World War I, all of them posthumously. Now we have at least 62 monuments around the state that are dedicated to soldiers of various wars, and at least 62 of them have World War I components, and that's just kind of a hodgepodge of them there. And there's a few more, and we're continuing to just stumble across these. I was in Beebe last month, and stopped at a gas station. I looked across the street, and well, that looks like a memorial. You start seeing these things, you know, and went over, and sure enough, there were World War I guys in there. So we have that included on our, and all these are on our website, www.arkansas.com, on the Sites and Memorials page. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some specific sculptural pieces that are around the state. This is the Young Memorial. It's at Hendrix College. It was the first sculpture to be erected after the war. It was sponsored by students and faculty of Hendrix to honor the 6 Hendrix students who died in the war. 5 of them died of disease, and one, Robert W. Young, was killed in action. And the Young Memorial is a marble sculpture designed by George Curry, who was a substitute Latin teacher at Hendrix. And it was unveiled on November 21, 1920, and it was rededicated within the last couple of years, moved and rededicated with a pair of helmet soldiers or helmet sculptures that honor 2 brothers who went to Hendrix who were killed in our recent wars. One died in Afghanistan, and one died in Iraq, and one was a special forces, one was a SEAL, so I think there might have been some sibling rivalry there. But Hendrix continues to honor its sons and daughters who die in combat. We have 2 sculptures that were done by John Paulding, who was that's Paulding on the left there, who was a sculptor out of Chicago. The first one is Over the Top, which is a statue that depicts a charging doughboy, and it was dedicated with great fanfare by at the Craighead County Courthouse in Jonesboro on May 30 of 1920. And the people of the county claim it was the first of its kind to be erected in the southern states. We have another Paulding sculpture. This is a Statue of Liberty replica that was unveiled at the Greene County Courthouse in Paragould on November 11, 1924, before an audience of 5,000. And I'm assuming they went with this different design because Jonesboro is so close and they didn't want to look like they were just copying off of Jonesboro. Now, two other Arkansas sculptures were the work of this guy who's just one of my favorites. This is Ernest M. Dick Viquesney of Spencer, Indiana, and he's been described as more P.T. Barnum than Michelangelo. And this is his Spirit of the American Doughboy sculpture, which is perhaps the most common World War I memorial in the United States. You can see these guys scattered all over the place. Viquesney also offered a 12-inch version for home display, as well as a charging doughboy who is equipped with a lamp and shade. So while the taste might be questionable, it's still an interesting artifact. The statue is very similar to Paulding's Over the Top, and that resulted in Viquesney losing the rights to the design in a lawsuit by the American Art Foundry. Paulding copyrighted his statue 5 months before Viquesney did his, and that was in July of 1920. And there's at least 140 spirits of the American Doughboys around the United States today. So the first Spirit of the American Doughboy was sponsored by the Phillips County Memorial Association and the Seven Generals chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy in Helena. It was dedicated on July 10, 1927, after a 9-year fundraising effort, and it still stands in the middle of Cherry Street by the courthouse in Helena, West Helena today. The second was sponsored by the Victor Ellig Post of the American Legion. This is in Fort Smith. It was unveiled at Fort Smith's Tillis Park on July 4 of 1930. It remained there for 50 years, but it was vandalized heavily, so eventually they took it down, and after it was restored, it was placed outside the American Legion building at 4901 Midland Avenue in Fort Smith. And with that nice little howitzer in front of it, this is perhaps the best armed war memorial in Arkansas. Okay, we also have the Herman Davis Memorial in Fort Smith that honors Arkansas's most decorated World War I soldier. Davis of Manila died on July 5, 1923. He had swallowed some gas during the war, and his health was pretty much ruined. But after his death in 23, the Julius Benham Jr. Post, number 5 of the American Legion in Mariana, started the Herman Davis Memorial Association. And after a series of delays, this memorial was dedicated on Memorial Day, May 25 of 1925. The Arkansas General Assembly designated the Herman Davis Memorial Park as a state park in 1953. So this is one of the smallest state parks in Arkansas. And also, as you walk out the front door, the fountain here at the old State House, which I need to get a picture of for the next time I do this, it was officially designated as the Herman Davis Memorial Fountain. So Herman's busting out all over. We have 2 marble doughboys around the state. This was fundraising for a monument in Eureka Springs. This is in Spring Park in Eureka Springs. Began in 1919, but it was not until December of 1928 that a contract was awarded, and it was apparently sometime in 1929 that this marble figure was erected in Spring Park and formally dedicated. And it's still there today. The main upkeep problem I'm told they have is that kids will go and put makeup on his face periodically. Go figure. And this is the World War I Doughboy at the Izard County Courthouse in Melbourne. This was placed around 1930, and it was rededicated in 1980 when the names of the county's World War II dead were added to the memorial. So this is I took that picture just a couple of weeks ago. It's a pretty cool statue. And finally, the most recent World War I memorial sculpture is this Doughboy statue by sculptor Fred Hoppe of Lincoln, Nebraska. This is at the new Randolph County Courthouse in Pocahontas. It's one of 3 sculptures. They have this Doughboy, they have a World War II soldier, and there's a Vietnam era soldier statue, all there at the corner of the courthouse lawn. This was dedicated on October 8, 2006 as an element of the Randolph County Veterans Memorial, showing that to this day Arkansas remembers her war dead. So that's a quick run through of them. I'd love to answer any questions. Yes, Ian.
Again, why Herman Davis is so revered?
He was the most honored, the most decorated soldier from Arkansas of World War I. Got some big French honors as well as American. But he was General Pershing, General John Pershing, put out a list after the war of the 100 most, the 100 greatest soldiers of World War I, and Herman Davis was among that group. And that's when a lot of his people up around Manila learned about it. So people started coming by and asking Davis if they could see his medals, at which point he would break out his fishing tackle box and show his medals. That's where he stored them. So, yes, ma'am.
How did we compare to other states around us in terms of either number that we did or the money? Was this the only way they were remembering?
You know, I can't really tell for sure. Like in Nashville, there's a World War I memorial that has, you know, it's like a 20-foot tall naked guy. You know, that's their World War I memorial. You know, so. You know, and you'll see your Dick McKesney sculptures scattered around. I can't really say how we compare overall, but we have been putting our sculptures on WWInarkansas.com, which I will shout out to again. But we're also sharing our things with the National World War I Centennial Commission has a website, and we've been putting our memorials on that side as well. And if you look at the map, Arkansas is looking pretty full compared to a lot of the other states. That might just be because we've got somebody who's able to do it, but so.
Do you have a date on when the fountain was officially designated by the state, Herman Davis Fountain?
I don't, but I will when I walk out the front door and look at it. So, but I think it was in the 20s.
I think so too. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a nice little exhibit next to it that has that. And
that smallest state park with his monument thing, I've heard that for ever and ever. What size are we talking about? Just the monument itself is considered a state park?
there's a lot with that in the middle of it. In fact, Davis is buried there. He's buried beneath or in the shadow of that monument. But it's less than an acre. I think Conway Cemetery State Park down in Lafayette County might be the. They're fighting for who's smaller. So.
That statue, his statue was moving to me in its simplicity.
Mm-hmm. Well, the original statue was vandalized to the point that they had to replace it. It was vandalized during the Vietnam War, and so there's something going on there. So this new one is the statue itself is newer than the backdrop is. Yes.
So during a lot of the same time period and from the same groups were a lot of the Confederate memorials, which of course there's a lot of controversy and backlash over.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything similar for the World War I ones since they were from those groups, or do they get a pass since they were on a different war? I think they're all collectively avoided.
Yeah.
How is that relation all getting
I'm not aware of any kind of controversy over the sponsors, and it's interesting that, that these, Confederate descendant groups did move on to a different war, just showing more of a patriotic bent than other things. And there's just not the same inherent potential controversy, with the World War I markers that you have with the Confederate markers. And I must say, having survived the Civil War sesquicentennial and now being involved in the World War I centennial, that the single biggest difference is I don't have the sons of Kaiser Wilhelm arguing with the American Legion about the cause of the war. So this is a lot mellower in that regard. Yeah.
Fine fellas.
Yes.
Do you know offhand how many African American soldiers did serve in World War I?
I don't have that number in my head, but it was a substantial number. If you go to World War I entry in the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, they have that.
But they're just folded into the general memorial.
Right. But they are peeled out of that 71,862 with their own discrete number there.
And are they listed in their home counties if they were killed in battle?
There are some counties that do, and I frankly don't know. I can't remember what county it was, but there's at least one county that has World War I soldiers. Then they list a name and then colored, and then a couple more names underneath. I don't know if other African American soldiers are lumped in with the overall names, or if they were simply ignored, or what. But I don't think that a lot of these markers have complete lists. The folks down in Hot Spring County who sponsored one of our trees, they did some additional research, and they've got, like, say, 10 names on their county courthouse marker. They found 15 or 20 more Hot Spring County guys who had I can't remember if it was just served or died during the war, but when they had their tree dedication, part of what they did was they read the names of each of these guys and rang a bell, which is kind of cool. And the audio to that is on the podcast page at WWI-Arkansas.com if you're looking for something to do this afternoon. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any of the monuments and memorials that list women in addition to the one that says U of A? I think you mentioned that one specifically, but are there more?
Not that I know of. I think that's the only female who's mentioned specifically, and I think that's because she was a grad of Fayetteville. And that's I don't think that's a diss or anything. I think it's just because they were she was a nurse, Red Cross or something like that, instead of being a enrolled soldier. Yes, sir.
Are there plans to do any continuing memorial?
Just the trees. Yeah. I haven't heard of any move to put up a new statue or anything like that at this point. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all for coming.